Akasa has been in the headlines in the recent past, primarily for taking some of its pilots to court. Now, there is a rule that co-pilots and captains have to serve from 6 months to 1 year notice once they decide to move on to another airline. And this rule is what Akasa has been trying to enforce in court. It's led to quite a bit of debate. Is that 6 months or 12 years in the case of captains, fair? Is it enforceable? Is it just something between the airline and the employee? Or is it also telling us about the great demand for pilots right now as capacity is built in Indian aviation? I'm sitting now today with Vinay Dube. He's founder and CEO, and he is going to clear the air. Vinay, is that what we're going to do today?
Absolutely, happy to.
Okay, so let's start with, why did you have to take them to court? Was it such a big hit to the operations of your airline that when pilots quit, and I believe up to 10%, you could, tell me if that's correct, 10% of your force, what happened and why has it led to a courtroom battle?
Got it. So thank you, Tamanna. I appreciate it. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. And I will give you all of the backstory because it needs to be well understood. So first and foremost, this rule that requires pilots to have a contractual notice period has been around for, maybe 15 plus years. And this was a civil aviation regulation that our regulator came out with, I think it was 2006. And so this has been around. This is not anything new. This is not related to new demand, new pilot shortage, nothing. This has been around, like I said, since 2006. Now, it's also important to understand why this rule was put in place by our regulator. And for that, I'll take you back to an unpleasant time, which we'd all like to forget, when we were locked up in our societies, in our buildings during COVID times. You'll remember that. And the people that were actually allowed to leave the buildings were people in the medical services and hospitals and nurses and doctors, or people, police and fire and ambulance, those kind, and airlines.
Journalists as well.
Journalists as well.
Okay.
Journalists as well, right?
Yeah.
So there were people that were termed essential services. They were so important to nation building, they're so important to the running of the country, that they were termed essential services. And pilots are an extremely important element of the airline. And it's with that background that this rule has been created. Because if a pilot leaves, calls you at 10 o'clock at night and says, sorry, I'm not coming tomorrow morning, it is extremely disruptive. And you leave passengers stranded at the airports. And so it's with that background that these rules are put in place. And it's not just for Akasa, it's for our customers. It's for the fact that customers shouldn't be left stranded. And yes, when a small group, and by the way, the overwhelming majority of pilots understand this responsibility. So I don't even want to portray it as though this is a pilot issue, not at all. The overwhelming majority of pilots really understand this responsibility and take their responsibility extremely seriously. It's, a small group that decided to do something that is just completely unprecedented.
May I just ask, you talked about essential services, understood. Right. You gave an example of a pilot saying at 10 in the night, I will not come tomorrow.
Right.
That's one extreme.
Sure.
The other extreme seems to be a 1 year notice. Is there nothing in between which would also give the pilot or the captain in this case a right to choice of employment?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Akasa's case, it's 6 months. You talked about, no notice period and 12 months. And, is there nothing in between?
6 months is pretty long as well.
So Tamanna, this is where, I would ask you to go back. And if you are a, software programmer at TCS, you're a chartered accountant at Ernst & Young, and you can take any job. 3 months is a reasonably standard notice period for people in multiple jobs. 6 months for us in this particular type of essential service for a job that really has a long training footprint, in our view, is not unreasonable, right? Because pilots have a training footprint. You can't create a pilot overnight, right? You need time to create a pilot. And at Akasa, we have contingency plans. We've got a 10-year plan for pilots. That's how long one needs to plan for pilots. You really have to have a very, very detailed plan, especially if you're growing like us, right? And we're back in growth mode, and we've always been in growth mode. And so you need a very detailed plan. And our view is that 6 months is actually a reasonable amount of time that allows passengers not to be stranded, right? As well as for pilots to be able to choose the trade that they want and go to companies that they want. That's our view.
So the question that has been asked is that when Akasa started onboarding pilots, did all of them serve 6-month notice from the places they came? Because you also came into being in very turbulent times. Some of what was happening in the pandemic also helped you with acquisition of aircrafts, etc. And the same with pilots as well, right? Everyone didn't serve a 6-month notice before coming to you.
So let me clarify that as well, Tamanna. We at Akasa have the highest standards of governance. I want to put that right up front. And this is not just the letter of the law. This is the spirit of the law. And at Akasa, our stated policy, as well as what we take pride in implementing, is the fact that we will not take anybody without a notice period unless anybody who's not served their full notice period, unless, and I'll be very particular about this because one needs to understand what the unless is. Unless there's been both a substantial and sustained violation of their contract by their employer. Okay, both substantial and sustained, as in sustained over months. And so the reason I'm saying that was because when we hired pilots, they had 20% cuts during COVID over months. Now, when you are an employee and you've got a 20% cut over months, well, then that particular employer can't just say, sorry, I've unilaterally cut your salary by a substantial amount and over sustained periods, but still you have to follow all the other parts of the contract, even though I'm violating this one, which is substantial and sustained. So, did we take, anybody without a notice period? It's only under those circumstances. And in fact, when we hire pilots, we get them to sign a declaration. And by the way, which says that, they're not violating any contractual notice period, that's it. But we also do our test on top of that. It's not that we just get them to sign a piece of paper, but we actually do our investigation on top of that in terms of when they're coming from. And have they been subjected to these kinds of, unilateral cuts over long periods of time? The minute the COVID cuts were eliminated and pilots got back to their contractual salaries, we never took anybody without violating this. So, and the same thing applies to us. I mean, if we unilaterally cut our pilot salaries by 20% over a 6-month period, we have no right to say, sorry, you have to still serve your 6-month notice period.
But that is your own internal rule. The rules that you're referring to, which have a 6-month and
100%.
a 12-month notice period.
6 month only.
Okay, I'm talking about you're saying the civil aviation rules that apply to everyone, which have this notice period in law, don't have any conditionality attached to it.
No, the current law, as was adjudicated by the Delhi High Court, is that they are subject to following the airline's contract. Right? It's very clear.
Whatever that may be.
Whatever that may be. In our case, it's 6 months.
Okay.
But if the airline themselves is rendering a contract null and void by making substantial and sustained changes to it, then the pilots should be within their rights to actually, make the decisions that they want to.
Even so, yes, you went to court. You have said that, this has harmed us. I will be asking you how exactly.
And harmed customers.
And harmed customers.
Yeah.
But to say that now you have to pay me 21 crores, including a substantial, 14 crores per pilot for ruining the reputation or impacting the reputation of the airline. Was that a bit excessive, Mr. Dube?
So Tamanna, what I will say I won't talk about the exact numbers because this is, a matter that's in court and it's not fitting for me to talk about these. But I will tell you, for the customers that we left stranded in July or in early August, it was not good for them. And that is what we were concerned about, was that as a result of someone calling you at 10 at night and saying, I'm not showing up tomorrow morning, we had to cancel flights. Now, what we did was we took longer term cancellations because we didn't, we thought we would rather take the hit on the revenue side and make longer term cancellations than run a, hand to mouth network, which, is not good for customers. So what we did was we took, longer term cancellations in July and August and early September and said, we'll take these. We'll take them well in advance. We'll refund the money back to our consumers just so you can operate a highly dependable schedule. And the good news for us right now is that we're back in growth mode. So if you look at what we have published for March, it's a network that's 30% bigger than what we're flying today.
Okay, that's excellent. But just to come back to the point,
sure.
The counter from the other side is, okay, so if the cost of training is 36 lakhs or 50 lakhs, or whatever the value of the bond is that the employee signs on, that has been paid. So what is this? This sounds like a penalty. Is this a warning to current employees and pilots?
No. So let me clarify. Let me clarify this because people get this confused quite often.
Okay.
There is a training reimbursement amount, right? Mm-hmm. So this is something that all airlines have with all pilots across the world, which is I'm spending so much on training, and as a result of that, I would expect you to stay for a certain duration of time, and if you don't, you will reimburse me this training amount, right? That's for training, but that has nothing to do with consumers, right? That is purely between the airline and the pilot, or the airline and the employee. Over and above that is another clause that is consumer-centric that says, by the way, you can't leave us for today, tomorrow. Mm-hmm. You can pay the training amount, you can pay 5 times the training amount, but you can't leave with 24 hours notice or 0 notice because you're going to leave consumers stranded. These are two conceptually completely different things, right? One is just between the pilot, and the company in terms of a training reimbursement agreement that is signed to stay for a certain duration, commensurate with the investment that is made. Nothing to do with safeguarding consumer interests. And by the way, when the DGCA came out with their civil aviation regulation way back in 2006, it was to protect the interests of the consumers. So, I would request us not to get confused with these two things, which are very separate.
Okay. You have mentioned now a few times the example of a call at 10 in the night that we're not coming the next day. Is that what happened? And did it happen in large numbers? What really was the scale of people exiting, which has elicited this response?
Absolutely, that's what happened. That we would get a notice at 10 o'clock at night that says we're not coming. Now, not 100% of the people that left did in this manner, but the vast majority of the 40 odd pilots that we're talking about left with less than 24 hours or 48 hours worth of notice. So absolutely that was the case.
What was the impact? Because now there is a bit of confusion out there. Is that the reason that you have rationalized routes because of the pilots leaving? Has that impacted your operations? Were some stations shut down? There's talk of Bengaluru, Chennai. What exactly has been the impact?
Yeah, so look, some of what was reported, was something that we rationalized way back in June, which was just regurgitated and reported again. So I'll ignore that, in terms of what happened in June or May, when we had access to some slots as a result of Go Air's shutdown. There was something completely different. But yes, in the late July and August timeframe, there were enough pilots, although it was a small number. Just keep in mind we're, at this point, a small growing airline. So a small number does have its impact, as a result of which we did have to pull down the amount of flying that we do. again, the good news is all of that is behind us. We took those decisions in July. We took those decisions in very, very early August, because we wanted to make sure that we don't have customers that show up, with 1 day, 2 days, 5 days, 20 days. So we took this reduction in schedule all the way till mid-November, after which we've started seeing an increase in the amount of flying. So,
can you give me a bit of detail on this, on what flights, the number of flights in between what routes have been curtailed?
Yeah, so this is not something that we've made public, Tamanna, and it's, honestly, it's not something that is so important. I would say that we continue to fly to 16 destinations as we had. So we haven't closed the destination as a result of that. We've pulled some frequencies, and we've pulled,
so Bangalore, Chennai.
It's one of them,
okay,
for example, but there are not a lot of these. For the most part, we curtailed frequency. Is what I can share with you. But again, all this is behind us, and we're back in growth mode.
We will come because that's important, that all of this now you're saying is behind you, but you're still 10% less of pilots that you had. So are you now onboarding more?
So sure, let me address that. So at Akasa, we are a team of planners. We are aviation geeks. We've been, our whole careers and have been spent in aviation, and we've seen the ups and downs. So from day one, we have been hiring pilots well in advance of our requirements.
Yes.
Right. And so we had 350 pilots or 330 pilots or so in April. By September, we had 450 pilots. So again, even accounting for the pilots that left, we have continued to increase our numbers, right? And today we have 450 plus pilots, with another, 125, 130 that have signed commitments with us already. So if you include the two, we are at 600. And by the way, you don't need, close to 600 to fly 20 aircraft. So the pilot hiring continued. It's just that it takes a while to train pilots to be able to, have them fly for their designated positions. And that training for multiple pilots is in place depending on when they were hired. So today we're able to put online pilots that we hired in September of last year. We're able to put online some pilots that we hired in January of this year. We're able to put online some pilots that were hired in May of this year. So this is not, and it's impossible to have a knee-jerk reaction because pilots have a long training footprint, right?
And notice periods to serve elsewhere, perhaps.
6 months, correct, is the notice period that we have.
So just one point on what's happening in the industry with more aircrafts coming on board, more players coming on board. I think it's not a big secret where your pilots are going. And that fight for talent, you think will continue with the way Indian aviation, especially domestically, is exploding?
So I'll keep my answer focused on pilots, given that's your line of questioning. So if we were to fast forward to 2030, when the industry is of a much larger size, but these aircraft orders are still coming in. At that point in 2030, the country has a need for about 1,500, 1,500 pilots per year. As a nation, we create 1.5 million engineers every year. So as a nation, there's no shortage of talents. 1.5 million engineers are created in India. What is 1,500 pilots when it's an incredibly high-paying job, right? So with good planning, this is nothing. We can create not 1,000, we can create 5,000 pilots a year and supply pilots to all our neighboring countries as we supply engineers and mathematicians and technicians and computer scientists to every part of the world, right? That's the capability of our country. So I don't see this as a problem at all. You just need to be planners and plan well in advance, as we hope we are at Akasa.
Let's come to the airlines plans going forward. We're going into, I think, a very important period for tourism and the aviation industry. Demand grows. You're entering your festive end of the year kind of season. What really are your plans to ramp up capability and on international sectors as well?
Yeah. So first, in terms of ramp up, thanks to aircraft delivery, we should have a couple more by the end of this year. We should exit the year with about 25 aircraft. Okay. We'll exit the subsequent, financial year with double our fleet today, so over 40 aircraft. So we're, back in growth mode. It's very, very exciting. And other than growth, the other part is international flying. We were awarded traffic rights recently. We're extremely excited. People always ask, what's the first international destination? And my view is we're not looking at the first. We're looking at the first, second, third, fourth, multiple destinations, because we think this is, profitable flying. And it's profitable flying that we want to partake in. And so I'd say, as we exit this fiscal year, you should see our first international flight. But I think what we are focused on is not just the first one, but the first.
So where are we flying to?
Well, it's going to be at this point a choice between Riyadh, Jeddah, Doha, Kuwait. These are some of the traffic rights that we've been given, and these are some of the most profitable flying that you have out of India. So it's very exciting for us.
Are you seeing fares going up again? Obviously, seasonally they do, but you also have crude really fluctuating, going up once more because of what's happening in West Asia. Do you see that impacting your final prices?
Yeah. So I would say a few things. One is that at Akasa, we have the most modern generation and the youngest fleet probably in the world, right? The aircraft that we've got is brand new, and it's the most modern generation aircraft, the most fuel efficient aircraft. So first at Akasa, we have the capability more than really any other airline in the world to be able to address the ups and downs of fuel pricing. That's one. But the second thing is, if you look at the response that came out from one of the market leaders in terms of fuel surcharge, clearly there is a move for the industry towards profitability that we are seeing. And so I think you'll continue to see ups and downs in...
Is that something you would consider similar or a fuel surcharge to that extent? Yeah, or you'd wait and see how customers and passengers are accepting it?
So Tamanna, I can't signal, just to be very clear. It is not, it is not legal for me to provide any signaling on price. And I can't do that. I'd just say that, prices in India are both consumer friendly, but I think based on what we are seeing, it clearly is an indication from one of the market leaders that they're also focused on profitable growth. And I would say at Akasa, we are focused on profitable growth ourselves, right? We're not chasing market share. There's no particular share number. We want to build an airline, that our grandchildren can fly on. We want to build an airline that's around for 50, 100 years. And for that, you need to plan long term and you need to plan for profitable growth. And that's what we're focused on.
So when you say that you're back in growth mode, are these, July, August, September problems behind the airline? Are those routes back or will they be back soon? You said November onwards, everything is fine. What do you mean when you say you're back in growth mode?
Sure. So when I say we're back in growth mode is that we decided to reduce our network to a number that we could comfortably and reliably fly as a result of some of our pilots leaving, right? And for that, we had to reduce the amount of flying. We decided to do that because we thought dependability was much more important than chasing profitability in the very short term. Because when you're dependable for your customers and reliable for your customers, that's what creates sort of long-term, customer satisfaction, and that pays off in the long term. So we reduced the amount of flying in the July, August, and September timeframe. And as our pilots, because as I told you, we've planned and hired many more pilots. We've hired in our system, probably twice the number of pilots than it takes to fly 20 aircraft, because we're planning for the long term. And so as these pilots start coming online and as we start getting aircraft deliveries, you'll see our network rise again. And when I say you can see it in the published schedule. And this is the reason why I say that, we will exit, this fiscal year with a network that's 30% larger than what we're flying today.
May I ask, what's your internal timeline to being, I think the next milestone or aim would be the third largest player? You have a consolidation with the big two. And then, of course, you saw what happened with Go, etc. I assume Akasa would be aiming to be the third largest player in India soon. What is your mental timeline?
So Tamanna, first and foremost, I want to repeat that we're not chasing market share. We don't have any such internal goal of a time frame to be X largest, Y market share. We just don't have that. We're here for the long run. And if you want to be around for the long run, you cannot chase short-term market share. You have to plan for 5 years, 8 years, 10 years from now. And that's what we are looking at. Having said that, in the month of July, we already were the number 3 player behind Indigo and the Tata Group. That already happened in July. So, that's around the corner. You don't have to wait, 6 months for that to happen consistently. But having said that, we're not chasing it at all.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Dube, for answering all of our questions today.
Pleasure. Thank you, Tamanna.